This message is also not appropriate for me to start off with the peace greeting. But you can say that this here, what the Bumble Clot, is part two of the last upload. Good riddance to Bad Bumble. There's a theory I've heard that Bumble was addressing the men with this talk of celibacy and saying that, that's not the answer. And there's another one that Bumble was addressing men and women. Let me go ahead and just address any one of these cases. If Bumble, as I supposed yesterday when I uploaded Good Riddance to Bad Bumble, was addressing only the women, well, then Bumble was right because the vow of celibacy is not the answer. Celibacy is not the answer for women, even without the vow. Even just the practice of it is not the answer for the women. I mean, they're not virgins, so um, that's one thing, and men know this, so that's true. Men know that these women are not virgins. So when you come to a man with celibacy, especially on the one app where you approach the man first, you're insulting that man. Okay, you're on this app. I'll approach you, but I'm celibate. Bitch, you were out there just smashing and fornicating with all these other dudes. And it wasn't even just a few. I already know it's going to be a bunch of them. It wasn't a big percentage of the dudes, but it was a bunch of them for one woman. And now you're going to come and approach me with celibacy. Most men can easily be approached by women that have something seriously wrong with them or offering something seriously wrong. If you're a man and you want to be approached, that's when it happens. You ask a man, they'll tell you. They get approached, but they get approached by women that are seriously overweight, deformed, got kids, and the man doesn't. Or, reformed 304s. Yeah. I mean, you find that there are men that have been approached with this stuff. And these will be men who did a lot of things in life to make themselves marketable and compatible with women that aren't bringing these major defects in. And yet, and still, those will be the ones that'll approach them, and only those will be the ones. I mean, you would think that if a guy is really 6'2", in shape, educated, and succeeding in his field, making himself comfortable, you would think, okay, a guy like that, you know what? He could be approached. He could be approached by women that have something going for themselves and by women that don't. Nope, it's just the women that don't. Just the ones that don't. He's childless. He gets approached by the single moms. And that's it. And nothing else. Or if he's in shape, he gets approached by the ones that are shaped like his tires. That's what happens. And so Bumble was right to tell the women this. Is it about just access to the women's bodies? I hope it is. It's really about something deeper, which is fair access to women's bodies. But, and I'm not talking about really objectifying women per se, as much as I am talking about not objectifying the men by insulting them. That's what I really mean. Yes, whether you like it or not, ladies, it is an insult to a man to say no to a bunch of dudes and then tell that one man no. And he knows it. That's an insult. It's an insult if he doesn't know it. Still an insult. It's only not an insult when you have consistently declined with various men, usually for religious reasons. And if it's religious reasons, then you're declining fornication. You're not declining sex. There's a difference. And y'all ain't with that. Y'all are like, Now, if I'm going to approach, then there must be something I take away. No, this is the age of equality. You don't get to do that. But now let's look at the third possibility. The second possibility. Bumble was actually using the images of the women to address the men, because the men are the ones that are practicing celibacy. Well, men don't have to vow celibacy in order to practice it. See, as in the West, all you have to do in order to be celibate as a man is have standards that are comparable to the ones you meet. That's it. If you have standards that are comparable to the ones you meet, the women will refuse to meet them and then also match with you, even if you approach the women. So, therefore, by saying you're not going to sell yourself short and ruin things for yourself, you wind up becoming celibate. You don't have to vow that. Now, I'm not going to necessarily call it involuntarily celibate per se, only because you still are making the choice to not go low in standards. That's why I don't call it that. Not because of how other people view the term incel. As I've stated, the definition of it exonerates the bearer of that description. It's not that. But I'm going to tell you that when it comes down to this notion that you can tell the men in the West, get off of your celibacy. No, you see, there are two options. Now, there are the guys that are incels. It doesn't matter what their standards are. They ain't getting none. And I don't know what percentage of the male population they make up, but then there are the ones that are celibate because of the mismatch, you can say, the standards mismatch. I'm not complaining about the ones that aren't able to fornicate per se, but it's still an insult to tell them no if you're not saying no across the board. However, there's not an option to marry sensibly, because for them to meet standards does not mean that they get to have standards. They are to meet them and still have none in order to not be celibate. And that's not okay. So, literally, within the era of false accusations, hyper scrutiny, runaway unjust hypergamy, paternity fraud, vicious misandry that encompasses and overarches all of this stuff, and social pressure under which even adult women fall to do these things to men simply out of some sort of hatred. This, in other words, this misandry, you're still looking for men to subject themselves to the options. Yes, you need to be a chemical engineer now, but you need to have been a basketball and football all-star in high school. And you need to look the part. And you need to have all this experience with all these other women. In the eight, with all of these dangers that I just listed, the women are sitting up and saying you got to meet all these standards in order for me to bring to you these dangers in exchange. That makes celibacy the safe option for men. So, as unnatural as it is, I still also propose another double standard. I propose a double standard if we don't blame the men. Why not? We don't blame the men simply because the other options were dangerous and you cannot afford that. The other options were very dangerous. The other options were all those dangers that I listed. And it can get as bad as you being locked up in the pen for a false accusation, and you got to be in PC because the other inmates don't know you innocent. Hell, if men get out there and they approach, even if men get out there and they approach right now, you got so many women lying about their age that dudes could be legally guilty even without being morally guilty. And it's not okay. It's not fair. So if it's addressing men for being celibate, well, so mother cuss word, what? What are the men supposed to do? Get out there and keep trying? No. They'd be fools for not trying celibacy. I mean, goodness gracious. The women's sexual activity has risen and the average man's sexual activity is going down. And it's not really because the women or the men are all just against fornication. I am. Certain religious groups are, but that's not what is leading this. It's just all the women chasing after the same few men, and that's it. And having disdain for the normal men. Anyway, the third possibility is that Bumble was sitting up and addressing both of them. Okay, that leads me right back to what I've been saying. It's only right to tell this to the ladies, and ain't nothing to say to the men. The women made the choice, the men made the best choice. Only thing to tell the men is, you know what, don't make it easy. Make them work for it and wait. I'm going to tell you also what the hell Bumble did that was screwed up. Bumble was the platform on which women had to make the first move. Why did they remove that? There were women that wanted to use the app for the feeling of empowerment, but they still wanted to be approached. Are you effing kidding me? They wanted both types of empowerment. What they really wanted was the power to choose who was going to approach them. Well, I mean, that's a nice fantasy to have, but the hell, man, or men or women would like that, but that's not realistic. It's not for anybody. And so, with that being said, um, Bumble actually did something that was worse than their talk of celibacy. Really, they did something far worse already. They've already shown themselves to be subject to the market's hypocrisy. And part of the reason I say that is because, well, we've already seen it. They initially required, they were presenting it like it was something novel, but it was, the women only had the option of making the first move. And I don't know if a bunch of men went on the website more so than women. I I would imagine that's what would have happened. But then the women would have realized, well, there are plenty of options on here. And they probably would have told other women, well, because of the way they set it up, there are plenty of options on there, just in terms of raw numbers. But you know what? The women would not have wanted the men that were on there. I don't even know how this worked. I just know that it must not have, because eventually they turned around and set it up to where men could make the first approach, initiate contact. Um, they did that. And That right there told me not that Bumble was necessarily wrong for the way that it is, but it told me that they had to adjust. And that's something that the CEO and anybody underneath her could have known from the very beginning. Western women do not make approaches with their best. They only make approaches with their worst. If they're going to make approaches with their best, they're still going to approach some of the worst of men. And that's it. And if you as a guy hearing this, you might be saying, well, why does that sound so damn negative, Black Mind? The reason is because that's how they've decided on a subconscious level that they're going to be. They've decided that they're going to make it as negative for you as possible. And that is the subconscious misandry that is programmed into the bulk of them so that they don't even have to identify themselves as feminist or misandrist in order to practice misandry. They have low self-esteem in many cases and insecurity. So it's not that they just feel that great about themselves. It's because they simply feel that you're even worse. That's all. And that's how you have to understand the misandry. It's not the misandry someone that thinks they're high and you're low. It's the misandry thinks someone that thinks that they're low and you're lower. And that will explain everything to you. That will explain why they would take something like Bumble and just demand that they still somehow be approached and be sought after. Okay, I'm feminist, I'm on Bumble, I'm empowered, but I still want to be approached. Make these men do it. What the F, man? And I learned something about Queen and Zinga I talked about. I learned something about her I did not know. I didn't know at first. I just learned it. I stumbled upon it. Queen and Zinga, she was on that stuff. She hated being called a queen. She demanded to be called a king. She had her men, her male concubines, that called themselves male wives, and she had them dressed like women. And she would have two of them she'd pick randomly to duel to the death. She would lay down with the winner. The next morning, she would still have the winner executed, and she never slept with the same one twice. Did y'all know that? She kept this harem going until age 75 when she finally married the youngest guy in the harem. She really wanted to be a man, more so than men do. Oh, she was a cold piece of work. And you got to understand that it is that inspiration that sits in a lot of the Anglophone diasporan women of today, and they're exporting it right back to Becky. Becky's on that stuff too. That's why they wrote the movie The Woman King. As much as Boom Chic and Becky don't really like each other that much, boy, the funny thing they seem to both agree on is their hatred of their own men. I hope that this explains it. I guess what I'm saying in this uploading with the Bumble Clot is that Bumble is just a barometer and a litmus indicator of not only how bad it is and how hypocritical it is, but how unaccountable they insist on being. Only issuing an apology for financial reasons, and not even to the men, either because they were not addressing the men in the first place, which means they knew that it wasn't us, or because they simply don't see us as valuable enough, or both. They're a litmus test for the misandry at a conscious and a subconscious level. You really are underappreciated over there. They detest you. And even when they marry you, they do. And I want you out. And those of you who cannot leave, I want you comfortable as you could possibly be by yourselves. And like I said, it's not natural. I don't advocate it in a normal situation. But because you must be, I want you as comfortable as possible. And I want you to also understand that even though it is unnatural, it is not your fault. Just because Bumble can't see it doesn't mean that it is your fault. I hope that this has helped you to understand. Again, thank you for listening. Black Heart, Black Mind, Blackout, Black Heterosexual, Non-Select Male Power. Just because Bumble don't like it. And Black Patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you for flying with us again here on Jet Black Airways, where Jet Black is also a verb. As usual, keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender, justice, forever.